Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 41 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. This week is one of our corporate podcasts, and we've got a crew with us today. Of course, I've got Chris Feeney, who is always here with me. Chris, how's it going?
It's going well, man. I'm excited for the new year. We got a lot of things teed up for the year, and excited about our topic today. This is one that I've been to this thing we'll talk about many times, and it's been amazing seeing it change over the years. But I think we've got a good topic today, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and we'll get into healthcare, and we'll get into IGEL Ready, and we'll get into partnerships as we get through this. But definitely the concept. We got Ron Neher with us. Ron, maybe I've been on a lot of meetings with Ron. Ron, have you joined a podcast before?
I think this is my first time on the podcast.
Okay, cool. What's the town in the background?
Telluride, Colorado.
Telluride. I've never been. I'm heading to Park City next week, and
Okay.
I'd love to go. It's similar to what you've got in the background there. Not as abrupt in terms of the mountains, but it's super close to the airport. I'm so lazy. I want to go ski. I want to go hang out. I don't want to ride in a car a couple hours to get to where I'm going.
Yeah.
How far is Telluride from a major airport?
Pretty far.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a little regional airport you can get into, but it's small. We normally just drive in.
Yeah. Well, maybe someday I'll make it. Maybe someday.
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
I saw James Taylor at Telluride, one summer, and it was like 80,
Yeah.
89 or 90. So it was pretty cool. A bluegrass festival there.
I'm
Yeah.
trying like crazy to convince my wife and kids as they get older to live part-time, if not full-time, out in the mountains in Utah. We'll see if I ever get it done.
Yeah.
Well, we've also got with us Divya Sagar. Hope I got that right. Divya or Devya? What's the best way to say it? I know I practiced for 10 minutes before we got going, and then I screwed it up anyway.
That's fine. My name has been screwed up much worse, but Divya is fine. Divya Sagar.
So Divya, tell us about your role, and as you finish telling us about your role, kind of parlay that into talking about the IGEL Ready program, which you and I've met multiple times. I know you're highly involved in IGEL Ready, and as you transition into that, Chris and Ron can fill in the gaps.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks for having me, Andy, and Chris and Ron. So I started with IGEL back in 2020, in March of 2020, with the primary objective of starting and launching the IGEL Ready program. It's our primary IGEL's primary flagship partner program for technology partners working with our ISVs and IHV partners to create this ecosystem of IGEL compatible solutions. And I basically lead the IGEL Ready team to guide strategy, planning, and roadmap for this program. That's my role here. I'm the director of the IGEL Ready program and part of the strategic alliances team here at IGEL. Prior to IGEL, I've spent a few years with Citrix on the Citrix Ready team, leading the marketing side of the Citrix Ready organization. And I'm based in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm pleased to be here.
So help me understand where the IGEL Ready program was when you got involved, and where it stands now in terms of number of certified partners, which, by the way, I'll tip my cap to IGEL. There's many thin client players in the space. IGEL is the one that seems to be leading with the most integration with the ecosystem and the community, which, every other week we do a blog or a podcast with Seb and the community. IGEL gets it. Like you can't have projects that don't have a portfolio of third-party things that can work in those projects, and that's a big part of the IGEL story. But help us understand where the community was and where it is now.
Sure. So so we launched the program in July of 2020. So when I joined, we were at the planning stage, and we were working towards getting ready to launch the program and make it open for the IGEL Ready partners to start joining. So even historically, Andy, IGEL has had a lot of integrations with different technologies, right? And Ron and Chris can add to that. But IGEL has had integrations with a lot of software companies and with a lot of endpoint companies as well. Not a lot of, but a few endpoints as well. before, which means that IGEL has been working well on these devices, and some of these software agents are integrated into IGEL. So that's history. That's even before IGEL Ready, this was the case, probably about 30 or 40 integrations in place. But with IGEL Ready, the idea was to kind of put a structure into place for all of these partnerships that we work with, make sure that these integrations work well for our customers, they are scalable, they are refreshable, and things like that. And also add a layer of marketing and some go-to-market market strategies on top of these integration. So not only are we making sure that we are verifying these technologies to work with IGEL and integrated with IGEL, but we work very closely with our partners to go to the market together, drive some co-marketing programs like webinars, podcasts, events. We are going to be talking about HIMSS. That's part of one of the benefits that we provide to our IGEL Ready partners as part of the program. So really the IGEL Ready program kind of structured all of this together, make this, the partnerships formalized. We launched a website where we publish all of these IGEL Ready solutions and partners that we have in the ecosystem. And today we are more than 120 partners strong. And we have a different number of partners in like multiple categories like endpoints, analytics partners, security applications, communication and collaboration applications. So yeah, it's growing by the day and it's quite well received in the industry. And this is the second time we are going for HIMSS this year. So yeah, I'm going to talk more about that.
So I kind of lived that story, right? I used to work with Jeff and Jeff back in the day, and I'd say, hey, does this work? Yeah, it should work. And what about this? Yeah, that should work. Oh yeah, I've done that one before. I don't know, but that should work. I think what you just described is a world where you, as a grown up business, made things that should work and officially tested, which is at the end of the day, when you're growing and becoming more viable in solutions the way IGEL is, you have to officially get that stamp of approval for things to work. I just noticed while you're talking, I've got my Printer Logic shirt on right there in the program. Printer Logic, they're part of your IGEL Ready program?
Yes.
I think every vendor we represent more or less is in there and part of your story. So before we move into the reviewing the blog around HIMSS and IGEL Ready partners that'll be there, Chris, Ron, any additional comments on the program itself?
Yeah, I work with Divya on a lot of kind of the IGEL Ready testing and stuff. So like Nutanix and Frame. Nutanix has got a Nutanix Ready as well. So we worked with them to make sure they were IGEL Ready, and we also went through their program for the Nutanix Ready. So yeah.
Chris, you're quiet. It's unusual.
No, that's always good to have some other folks chatting. I'm excited about the program, just seeing how it's evolved over the last couple of years. And obviously we've got a good lineup of vendors that will be participating with us, showcasing their stuff. One of the things that I loved about when we went to HIMSS in August, apart from the fact that, just having a conference again in person, I got a chance to meet some of these vendors and really understand sort of where our integrations are with them. Specifically, like I got some EPOS devices. I got an LG Gram, and I use that a lot. I used it at your kickoff to kind of display and present. Nothing better than to demo the product on the device that's been IGEL Readyized, if you will. We've also got Login VSI coming up, a joint webinar with you and the XenTegra team. So I'm excited about that, and some really cool stuff that's happening. Dynabook is one that Ron worked on. One of their laptops. So there's a lot of really, really cool stuff. And obviously some of the ones that you already partner with, like Lenovo and LG. And so,
let's use HIMSS 2022, which, by the way, when I talked to you guys yesterday about HIMSS 2022, I had to remind myself, okay, I felt like I just left HIMSS 2021 and it was in August. So there's coming up close to each other. Yeah. I was amazed at how big it was, even though it was only probably a tenth of what it normally is. It's a big show, but that show gives you guys a chance to get in front of the world, the healthcare world in this case, with your IGEL Ready partners. Let's use this blog to talk through them and where they fit. I guess. So let's talk about the very first one on the list here, which is IGEL is an IGEL Ready partner, and I think what you're talking about there is the idea that the IGEL Software Ready program works with the IGEL Hardware program to be IGEL Ready. Is that really what you're calling out here?
Yeah, it's really, I mean, with our shift and focus towards a software solution, I mean, obviously we've had IGEL hardware for many years, but just really focusing on the operating system and the software piece. One of the things that a great benefit that we've seen, and we'll talk through this here shortly, is as we've added new hardware vendors and their devices, some of these new devices, that the benefit has been the Linux kernel that works with some of these newer, chipsets and other stuff. I mean, that has actually allowed IGEL to incorporate those changes so that we can work well on these devices. There have been some learning curves because some devices are seen differently or whatever, but that's been one of the benefits of the program because obviously it benefits some of the newer hardware devices that might be coming to market or on the market with some of these vendors, but also backward compatibility, some older devices that have been out there for a number of years. And so hardware support has continued to expand. And so that's been a big benefit of the operating system and the IGEL Ready program. Divya, I don't know, or Ron, do you have any other comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, to that, Andy, basically at HIMSS, the idea is that IGEL will be showcasing this complete ecosystem of all of these edge computing solutions, right? So all of the partners the companies that are listed below in that blog are also IGEL Ready partners. And that really is a kind of a true testament to what I was just saying, right? Joining forces with all of these IGEL Ready partners at an event like HIMSS, right? So this is a fantastic opportunity to kind of participate together as a joint exhibitor. So what we have there is a large pavilion where we have kind of exclusive pods for each of the companies. IGEL, of course, works with each of them. So IGEL has to be it is the highlight, or it is the binding force amongst all the pods. But then each of our partners get a pod. We'll have some presentations. We'll all the partners get to kind of present their solutions. But all in all, this is how IGEL and our ecosystem of partners is helping kind of bring the change in the healthcare industry, or helping these organizations shift to innovative technologies through IGEL OS.
Let's go to the next one. The next one on the list is Controla. So what is Controla and why does it matter to the IGEL community? Divya, you want to jump on that first?
Yeah, so Controla is one of our analytics partners, and their agent is baked into IGEL. It's integrated with IGEL, and they basically help deliver digital employee experience management and an analytics software basically to analyze the digital experience for the customers. And their agent is baked into IGEL OS. So whenever IGEL OS licenses are shipped, Controla is part of that, and the customers kind of get access to that to activate that. And they are big in healthcare as well. I don't know, Chris, if you want to add something to that effect.
Yeah, certainly Ron feels free to chime in too, but I think the big picture here is that as healthcare maybe moves off of Windows as the endpoint that is being utilized by the healthcare workers in various parts of the organization, whether it's in the back office or out there in charge of patient care, having something like Controla to be able to show you, hey, are we having trouble with wireless? Are we having issues with the Citrix or other types of connections? Are the endpoints, being overloaded? What's going on? Having that type of solution that gives you that detail, and Controla is certainly one of others, but definitely they've got a great solution, and you'll get a chance to see sort of how they have integrated with IGEL. What's really cool is that their management console, they've actually leveraged our REST API, so you can actually send commands from Controla down through our UMS to endpoints and do some basic management. That I don't know what their full capacity is off the top of my head, but they've done additional integration there. That's pretty cool.
Ron, you want to chime in on this one?
Oh no, I think Chris kind of covered it. I think the key thing is having that end-to-end visibility. So if you've got healthcare workers or mobile clinicians or moving around and saying, hey, my performance on Wednesday is really bad. Why is that? Having something like Controla to understand the root cause. Yeah.
So impromptu poll here. How many of you guys have heard someone say, I'm using virtual desktops, the endpoint doesn't matter? Everybody, right?
Yeah.
There are people out there that think that, and those are the people that implement projects that fail because it's an asynchronous solution. The endpoint very much matters, whether it's in user experience, whether it's performance, whether it's viability for peripheral support. Lots of things matter on the endpoint. And in some cases, it's the exact opposite, right? It's all about the endpoint, not about the back-end system. I met with a large community college. They're one of the largest in the country 10 plus years ago. And the director just kept saying he wanted to do a thin client project. And after about an hour of trying to convince him he wanted to do a desktop virtualization, app virtualization, predecessor to cloud project, finally I just gave in and said, okay, we'll implement thin clients. And then we got to figure out how to make them work, how to make the back end work. It's interesting how people look at it, but it's certainly a solution that the back end and the endpoint both have to be thought about during the design.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, VDI is not new. We've been talking about it for at least a decade plus at this point. A lot of lessons to be learned, and certainly, I think IGEL sort of taken a page from some of those and tried to make it better. And I'm gonna let Ron talk about this one. This is the one he's been integrating with. So Ron, Dynabook, not Don. Ron, talk about Dynabook, please, and what you've been doing with them.
Yeah, one of the things I like about Dynabook, like IGEL, they're 100% channel focused. They don't sell anything direct. Never will. They do not. So they rely on their channel partners in the channel to sell. Dynabook, during the supply constraint on chips and parts like that, their relationship with what they've got in their factories and with Foxconn, they had product the whole time things were going on. You could get a really nice laptop at a low cost that runs IGEL great. All of their peripherals and stuff, their audio chips and everything else is always worked with IGEL and Linux. So it's very nice, very easy system to use. So I'm a big fan, and I've got my own personal laptop is a Dynabook now.
So guys, where do these guys fit into the landscape of hardware providers for IGEL use cases? Are they the guys that make the cheapest laptops? Are they the guys that make the best PC? Are they the guys that just have the ability to get you product when others can't? Divya, do you have a take on that?
Andy, I'm not, I think I would go with the last one. I don't think, if there is a unique USP that I would call out about Dynabook from compared to an LG laptop or a Lenovo laptop. But probably Ron, what do you think?
Well, no, that's just what I was saying. They don't sell direct. They're channel focused, right? So they're not going to come in and cut you out of that or whatever, or go direct, right? With that, the products are locked in with the chipsets that support Linux, and it's ready to go right out of the bag. Some of the other ones, because of chip constraints, they were grabbing other chips, trying to put stuff in, and it was more testing needs to go on. You order a bunch of Dynabooks, they all come in the same SKU with all the same parts. Simple. You get one working in the SKU, they all work in that SKU. So
Ron, here's a question for you that's going to catch you out of the blue. I think, does Dynabook truly understand our mobile users and the need for docking stations that can allow me to dock at home, take the device, be mobile, get to the office, redock it? Have you played with any docking stations from these guys and their integrations into their own platform?
Yeah, they have a basic, USB, C type connector that just plugs in, and their peripherals, work with that right out of the gate. So yeah.
Yeah, I think they actually presented, I think, internally to the IGEL team about a week or two ago. They've got quite a lineup of devices that have gone through the IGEL Ready qualification validation process. in healthcare, where you typically see laptops might be on roaming carts, for example, where they need, some kind of a laptop, but also one of the benefits in a roaming cart is obviously you've got the local battery that we've seen where, because they're running IGEL, that battery life often gets extended because of just a different operating system. So on the IGEL Ready page are some more details about some of the Dynabook options, and then obviously they'll be showcasing some of those at
Well,
HIMSS.
while you guys are talking about it, I'm Googling them because I really don't know them.
It used to be the Toshiba. Divya, I know they rebranded, so that's why not their name. The Dynabook name isn't well known.
Right.
so-
They're part of the Toshiba group.
Which is, according to Google, right, there's owned by Sharp somewhere in the mix of all this, Sharp. And they're based in Japan, which I don't know of any other PC hardware makers based in Japan versus other Asian countries. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. EG Innovations. Divya, you're our special guest. You want to take this one first?
Sure. So EG Innovations, again, like Controla, it is their agent is baked into IGEL, and they are kind of they help with end user experience monitoring capabilities. So like we were talking about Controla, so EG Innovations also kind of helps pull out clinical data from the end user from the endpoints, manage their IT operations, simplify their healthcare compliance. So those sort of capabilities, and what we've seen, so they have an application called EG Enterprise, and of course they're going to demo that a little bit more at HIMSS. But basically, their objective is that they try and aim for improving these log-on times for the clinical workforce, and also helping resolve their issues around the endpoint management. Reduce some support kind of incidents and support costs with their EG Enterprise app.
Ron, Chris, anything else to chime in on EG?
I mean, one of the, EG's been around for a long time, and, a lot of our clients have standardized on that and the other tools, and just being able to have that now integration down to the IGEL endpoint as well. I mean, you can think about a branch office in a bank or something. You might want to do synthetic, user monitoring to simulate user actions, to know about, any potential problems before the bank opens up, or the, the hospital branch opens up, or whatever. You can run those synthetic testing, before, and if the performance isn't there or hiccups, then you could, log a ticket and get people working on it before the branch, opens up. So, that's an option.
Yeah, I think a lot of these analytics vendors are very similar. To be honest, I spent a little bit of time with them. Didn't get a real in-depth demo of their product, but definitely I think any one of these analytics vendors can give you more than what's sort of built in from an IGEL perspective, but some ideas on, hey, what's really going on in the environment? Is it really a problem at the endpoint, or is there something else in between?
It's possible already. We've talked about EG, we've talked about Controla. You could have both, right? I mean, Controla does kind of real time and action. EG gives you legacy analytics type stuff, and there's areas for both in the same environment we see.
Yeah, no, that's good.
All right, the next on the list is EPOS, which has a history. It's not new, it's just got a newer name, I think, and I'll let you guys explain that.
Similar to Dynabook, they rebranded Sennheiser. People may know that name, but EPOS is the new name. Similar devices, and a lot of like Andy, you and I've talked probably since about how there's software fixes or updates feature-wise that might improve an audio experience, but there are situations where having a better hardware device from an audio perspective will make a difference with noise cancellation technology, among other things. I mean, I have been benefiting from trying these things out at home. I've got a headset I've got the speakerphone I'm using now. I've got another one that's over the ear, very similar, like a Bose over the ear kind of thing. And you get a somewhat different experience with either one, but the better audio does make a difference. And so depending on the use case, could be for conference calls, dictation, maybe, often not, but call centers. I mean, there's a variety of different scenarios where their devices, and they've got quite a bit. But what they've done is they've got EPOS Connect is their client software that would plug into and report up into the management console. That management console is can be on-prem or in the cloud. And so I've had a chance to set mine up and point it to the cloud and then be able to see what firmware is running on the device, if there's an update that's required, because they do have software on the devices that could get updated, whether it's for the Bluetooth dongle or maybe the device itself. So that's how they integrate with IGEL.
So Chris, a couple things, right? It's good hardware and with good baked in software into the hardware and the ability to integrate with the console. I'll give you a quick story. You were part of it recently where customer was going to scrap their entire IGEL setup. And when we started talking to them more, we found out that they were using basically the lowest cost, cheapest speaker in their Teams offloading they could get. I don't know what ended up happening with that customer, but an entire project and tens of thousands of dollars worth of investment into IGEL was about to go out the window because of a $20 speaker.
Yeah, exactly. I know we got engaged on that and got a chance to send them a device or two to try them out. And I mean, I think the customer was saying, I'll just go back to Windows, like a more expensive solution on the endpoint than perhaps just a better piece of hardware for what their use case was. So I think it really comes down to this, Andy, like we talked about earlier, the endpoint will matter, and also maybe some peripherals plugged into that device. So, I mean, you've got a whole companies like Nuance that has these very nice microphones, Dragon, that are specific for healthcare, and they have a lot of stuff built into that. And if it's not a great user experience, can't record well with the voice or whatever, then obviously it would get rejected, but they've been doing it a long time. And so having that type of device or something that gives you that better experience it will make a difference. So certainly worth a look if you're either looking online or at the Orlando conference here in about a month or so.
Also, if I can just add one thing towards EPOS is that especially for, doctors and medical professionals, I think first, of course, like Chris was saying, they are high quality devices, right? With the noise canceling built in and, easy to get onto Teams. They are certified for Teams, but also kind of, without the quality being compromised, it gives kind of the freedom to move around for them. It gives them the mobility with their kind of Bluetooth enabled headsets and the conferencing solutions and the speakers and everything. And they work kind of seamlessly with IGEL and, for them to be updated via the UMS and everything. So I think that works out really well for the needs of a medical professional.
Yeah. I think that whole conversation is all about you're only as good as the weakest link. And if your weakest link is an issue, which in some cases it will be when it comes to audio and video, it helps. You got to invest in a company that, number one, creates quality products, but number two, like we're talking about here, knows how to integrate and certify those solutions with, in this case, IGEL.
Yep.
All right, so the next one on the list is a behemoth in terms of the story that we're all trying to tell, and that's Lenovo. And I was literally just telling my team an hour ago, the Lenovo story at XenTegra should be huge, whether it's around compute or storage, endpoint devices. Every part of our business requires back-end processing and endpoint processing, and Lenovo aligns really well with that. Now, getting Lenovo to 100% become a solution-oriented, think holistically company has been a little bit of a challenge for me, if I'm being honest, but they're starting to get it. And I think they tie in really well with IGEL. So Ron, you want to jump on where Lenovo fits into what you guys are doing at HIMSS?
Yeah, I mean, from a Lenovo and IGEL point of view and the IGEL Ready, we work with them to make sure that they've certify their new platforms as they come out on IGEL. And they're part of the IGEL community. Rob Kirk from Lenovo, so people have questions, he answers within there as well. I don't know, Divya, any other?
Well, they do have a variety of devices that are verified with IGEL Ready and published on the website, right? Ranging from their yoga ThinkPad to, their Thin Clients, Think Center, and some, of course, the laptops and everything. And they're continuing to add more towards more to IGEL Ready, and they have a huge focus on VDI, especially on their devices, as far as I can kind of get the message from them.
Yeah, a little story. So HIMSS 2019, I'm going to go with that. I think it was 2019. I was there, and IGEL was actually part of the Citrix Ready booth at the time. We didn't have our own. And Simon Cleffin brought me over to a meeting with Lenovo, and we were trying to promote, obviously, working with them. This is obviously pre-IGEL Ready. And then, about a year later, Divya comes on to start that program. We get the clamp down pandemic, and Lenovo was, I think, our first big IGEL endpoint vendor that signed on. So kudos to Bill McCarthy, who is not able to join us today, but was a big part of that. And obviously, what's really exciting is I'm pretty sure, Divya, correct me if I'm wrong, but they will soon be able to ship direct from factory with IGEL on preloaded on devices, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's coming. I'm not sure with the date on that, but I think that's right.
That's the conversation going on, and the teams are working towards it. I don't have a date at this time, but
yeah,
that's on the roadmap.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'm extremely excited because of the portfolio of products Lenovo has that we can then take the IGEL capabilities, the software enabled world, and put on top of those. I'm probably more excited. So to Chris's point, probably 2017, 2018, I'm running around at conferences, grabbing Lenovo people and bringing them over to the IGEL booth, trying to talk to them about, they need to get off VXL and integrate with IGEL. And it sounds like it's happening. Maybe not as fast as I want, but it's happening.
Yeah, definitely. It's great to see the progress that's been made. And since the time that I've been here, it's amazing.
I mean, I'll give you an example. While we were talking, I went out and looked at the Lenovo offerings in terms of devices, and it far exceeds, between PCs and laptops and tablets, all the other guys' offerings and things that could potentially be IGEL Ready certified. The next one on the list is LG, which, if we go back to that previous conversation about Lenovo, I think all of us have tried to really bring Lenovo into this IGEL and end user compute, virtual app, virtual desktop, digital workspace world. We haven't had to drag LG into it. They've come running into the fire with us. Let's talk about LG and them being at HIMSS with you guys.
Yeah, LG has been with us since the launch of IGEL Ready, Andy. They were probably the first partner, endpoint partner to sign with us. In fact, even before the launch, they were reviewing the test kits that we provide for the testing, to be done on their devices. They were very, very proactive in working with us. They were kind of the beta testers on our test kits as well. They started kind of, running those on their devices. And the relationship has really grown from that end over the last year. We've kind of worked together, joined forces on a lot of marketing initiatives with them. And like we were talking about Lenovo, we are mostly all set with the plan of LG preloading IGEL OS in the factory, at least on 2 of their models, starting spring of this year. So we've come a long way with LG in the past 1.5 years.
Chris, Ron, on LG?
Yeah, what's exciting is in recent conversations we've been talking, they're actually standing up sort of executive briefing centers where their devices will be available for on-site meetings. Well, obviously, what's really cool is the booth. They sponsored the booth itself in Vegas by providing nice monitors for each of the vendors. We asked Lenovo if they cared. They were like, no, we're fine. So, but yeah, LG's been great to work with. Fantastic team. We're excited about showcasing some of what they have, including one of their all-in-one devices that has some functionality built in specific for healthcare. So
Chris, do you want to talk, add something about the health card that they had on at HIMSS last year?
Hey, before
Yeah.
we go there, I just want to highlight, LG has a great laptop that's IGEL ready. They've got at least one, if not multiple PC small form factors IGEL ready. And then Chris touched on briefly, which we're going to go into more detail here, I'm sure. And that is the multiple all-in-ones that LG has ready. That goes back to my comment a while ago. Once LG realized that IGEL was going to be a platform they could integrate with and take to market, they came running into the fray with us versus us begging them to come play along. Go ahead, Chris, with the all-in-one in healthcare.
Yeah, so I'll kind of cover both. So at HIMSS in Vegas in August, we had a sort of a showcase demo. In the middle was a roaming cart, and we had an LG all-in-one monitor at the top. It was basically, the thin client, but it had a built-in prox reader. So that reader also we had integrated within Pravada, so we had that software demo going, and so everything worked. I mean, the IGEL installed fine, networking was fine, the integration with that reader with the software from Impravada, and obviously a purpose-built platform for healthcare with a clean monitor and all that stuff we were keying on. So. I believe we'll probably have that same setup again in Orlando, so we'll have to see. But yeah, they've got some good options to consider.
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at my desk right now. I've got a tablet which I take back and forth. I've got a docking station, and I've got a big screen and a nice microphone and webcam. Ideal world though, I walk in, I just step in front of an all-in-one everywhere I go in the office, and life would be good, and I wouldn't have cables all over the place.
Yeah, I did a similar thing. You can't really see it because of my virtual background, but I got an LG Gram mobile thin client sent to me after the Vegas HIMSS, and I've been using it when I'm on the road or just in general, and it's a fantastic platform, runs great with IGEL installed directly or from a UD Pocket. Either option works for it really well. And I would imagine, as Ron mentioned earlier, Dynabook, a similar experience. So just knowing you've got a lot of options available to you as part of this IGEL Ready program, it's really cool to see.
All right, we got 3 more to go. Not to diminish it, Liquidware. I'm talking about what Liquidware does in terms of the analytics and monitoring, and to be honest, just above and beyond a great partner for both IGEL and XenTegra.
Yeah, I saw on LinkedIn yesterday some postings about the application layering technology that they offer. I know some of their prior competitors got bought or pulled into some other platforms, but they're sort of still the one independent. But they do offer an analytics solution. We have a client that plugs in that you can just turn on and point to their Stratosphere reporting system, and then get a lot of the information around similar to what we've talked about with Controla for EG Innovations, some of that visibility, diagnostics, monitoring, user experience. And they've got a great tool, certainly if you have devices and you're not sure how they would perform before you try to put IGEL on them. They have a program where you can put a self-dissolving agent on devices like Windows machines, for example, have them report in for a week or so, get some analytics off of that, and then determine, can it install IGEL or would it go to the next version of Windows? And if it does run IGEL, can it meet the use cases for things like unified comms or whatever? So they've got quite a bit to offer. Ron and Divya, I don't know if you have any other comments from Liquidware.
No, I think you've got them all covered. Great product.
I would just add again, if you're a partner or a customer, they're just great to work with. And as Chris pointed out, the tool to gauge your environment ahead of time to see if it'll fit, your devices are a good fit for IGEL and your solution, just shows they get it.
Yeah, they've been a great team to work with, Jason Smith and the whole crew. So.
All right,
been a great partner, and I think they also have very good relationships with other IGEL Ready partners, with Citrix and with everybody. So definitely a great team to work with.
Yeah, I love the fact, as Chris mentioned, that their company and individual products haven't been bought up. It allows them to continue to innovate and partner versus getting washed out in the whole process.
Yeah, definitely. And they know end user computing. I mean, that's really what we're here about. I mean, they know it, they get it. Not that the others don't, but they've been doing it a long time. So it's certainly worth your while to give them to take a look at what they have.
Yeah. All right, login VSI. Ron, I'll let you jump on this one.
Yeah, from the login VSI, you know, similar to the other analytic tools out there, but again, where they were kind of strong was around that synthetic kind of load balancing and stuff. So that, you know, again, another example would be a branch office or whatever, being able to, you know, have that load, test things out before things open, and, you know, triage those, you know, before the bank opens or whatnot. So again, just really around sizing and stuff like that. So, Chris?
Yeah, what's really cool about Login VCI, I think they've sort of added some additional functionality, but the simulation where you can say, hey, we're going to make a change. Why don't we, do we have a tool that can simulate what that might look like? And they do. You can, you know, turn their tool on, and in our case, turn it on and have it point to their system. So, and then it simulates a workload on an IGEL device, and then gives feedback and data and information that you can use to make decisions. Or if a change is coming, and we'll have a webinar with them in XenTegra coming up here in a short while. I think it's in March, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll get a chance to talk more about that integration piece. But they've got a really cool tool. Look forward to seeing more of what they can do. But a lot of it is around just performance analytics, and then obviously change control and seeing what would happen. Can we identify what would happen if this change does take place?
So Chris,
So Chris, yeah, you kind of brought up a good point around that. I mean, if you think about your life cycle, so you've got a new version, say a new version of an application coming out, you're going to test it in your pre-prod QA before you release to production. You could load test on there and say, hey, this requires another 10%, you know, memory or a little extra CPU. And then you could size that, saying, hey, if we roll this into production, you know, we may not be able to support the, you know, the same number of users per blade or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Around that, or be able to see when that new version comes out and see, hey, you run it and you say, hey, after we run it for an hour or two, we see a big memory leak. We're not going to roll that into production. Let's go back to the vendor or our developers and fix that before we roll it out, right? So always good to have those tools and that visibility instead of just dropping something into production and then having an outage or an issue, right?
Absolutely.
So guys, let me understand this. So am I able to put the Login VSI launcher on an IGEL unit and launch 50 sessions to do backend load testing?
You can definitely enable it on the IGEL. It's built in. As far as how many sessions can you try to simulate all at once, I don't know that. I wish I did, but you can definitely do that simulation piece. I need to defer to the Login VSI team to find out.
Yeah. I mean, you'd want to get that end to end, right? You want to see what is it going to do to your backend VDI, right? So if you have a blade in your vSAN node or whatever, and it supports, you know, 50 users or 80 users on that blade, when you go to get the new software, the new update, you know, and say, hey, you know, we're only, you know, we're getting 10% less, but then also look at what's going on the IGEL endpoint as well, you know, to say, hey, this new version of Citrix or whatever, let's test this, you know, bang it hard in the lab and, you know, see what's going before you roll it into production. Yeah.
All right, so the last one on the list is printing related, and it only matters for people who print, right? I've been in IT 30 years now, more or less, kind of, sort of, not quite that old, but close, getting there. And I was told 25 years ago, nobody would need to print in a few years. Well, that's not true. People still print. So the next IGEL Ready partner we're talking about here is Triceret. And Chris, you want to jump on and tell me what Triceret's doing as an IGEL Ready partner?
Truth be told, I wish I could speak more intelligently to this, but in general, having a solution like this where from the endpoint, you need to be able to print and have that flexibility, any device, any location. I think that's really, says healthcare workers are roaming from machine to machine. I think that's where Tricera really kind of makes their case for being a great solution. I personally have not had a chance to work with them on opportunities in the past. Ron, I don't know, or Divya, if you've had any other comments on Tricera.
Well, they are still working with us, Andy and Chris, to get their software, their printer driver integrated into IGEL OS. That has still not happened. So they are our activated level partner at IGEL Ready, which means that they work with IGEL, but they are and on UMS and everything, but they are yet to be integrated. But what I've seen about them is that they do offer a very cool dashboard to manage this, mobile printing sort of needs. It's a very cool drag and drop application and a dashboard that they have. They work on Microsoft, Citrix, VMware, and of course IGEL. And I think what I've learned from them is that it is kind of very scalable, and also in terms of there are not a lot of bandwidth issues when it comes to printing, even if there are thousands of users, which I think is a focus, which is a need for healthcare as well. I think printing. Healthcare has been an important vertical for a lot of the printing partners that I work with at IGEL Ready. I feel like healthcare and education mostly seems to be their top two verticals. So I think it is a right fit to be at HIMSS and to be a healthcare focused solution.
Yeah, and I think the big message is, we've got, healthcare customers that have standardized on this software, and being able to have it part of the IGEL Ready, it's just, being able to leverage that across, right? So.
Absolutely.
Well, I do love the fact you guys called out healthcare and education for, people that print a lot still. They definitely do, and probably will for a long time. Having integrated printing solutions in IGEL ready to go, drivers, management consoles, devices that can be part of that story, and for remote printing scenarios, that's what I've seen Tricera have, and having that into the Linux ecosystem, aka IGEL, which is to some degree the only real Linux endpoint in the enterprise, as far as I'm concerned, and probably not far from the truth. It just matters, right? Printing is part of that story. So guys, I think we've covered the IGEL Ready partners that'll be with you guys at HIMSS, but we haven't really talked about HIMSS specifically. That is March 15th is when that starts, and you guys will be in the expo hall with these partners all day for a couple of days.
Yeah, 3 days, I think, on the show floor. We've got some events, VIP lunch, as well as a reception that you can register for. When this podcast goes out, the link will be there. So certainly take a look if you're going to be there. And then, Divya, do you want to talk about the partner advisory board meeting and sort of what goes on there?
Yes, absolutely. I was about to add that. So the other thing is, on the 14th, we are hosting this IGEL Ready Advisory Board meeting for our IGEL Ready partners. A few of them, especially the ones who are sponsoring or who will be around at HIMSS, about 40 or 50 folks will be attending that. We did the first one back in August, again at HIMSS, use that as the venue. Here, basically, two objectives to the meeting, of course, our team and our executives, and, including Jed and Brad and a few of us, share some messages with the IGEL Ready partners about our roadmap for this year, our strategies, and how we can kind of go to market together. But we also hear from our partners, basically. So a large part of it is, a focus group where we kind of brainstorm with our partners in terms of what we can do better, how the program can be made more valuable to the partners, what are the different go-to-marketing activities we can align on in 2022. So that is an exciting session. It was really well received last time around. We are hoping to do that again. It's scheduled on the 14th of March, a day before the show begins.
Yeah, I would like to sneak my way into that meeting this year. Last year I knew of it and then didn't realize why I didn't get an invite. And then I realized I wasn't the type partner that meeting was for. But this year I'm going to try to find my way into it. I want to hear the conversation, see what you guys are talking about.
Yeah, well, the big one is we've got a new version of IGEL OS coming, OS 12, and also the UMS 12. They're going to sync up on the versioning numbers, but that'll be a big thing for IGEL this year. We I think we've got some dates kind of out there as far as when that would go out, GA. But more to come on that. We can talk about on future podcasts.
All right, guys. Well, we've reached close to the end of the hour, and I got to move on to the next thing. But it's been great talking to you guys, and I appreciate the work you're putting into the IGEL Ready program.
Thanks, Andy,
All
for
right,
hosting.
thanks.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks, Davey. Thanks, Ron.
And Chris and I do these every so often on specific vendors that are part of the program. Well, Chris, I'll leave it up to you to invite these guys back to join us at some point.
Yeah, I'll get with Divya. We'll line some of these folks up. I'm sure they'd love to join and talk. So.
All right, guys. Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, bye.
Bye.